Hi everyone, this is Citlalli from the Mexica movement, and I'm in grad school. And every time I sit down and study all of these books and articles, I can't stop but wonder and think about our situation right now, what's going on under the Trump regime here in the so-called United States of America. Now, in order for us to understand this whole rise of white nationalism and this whole rise of a polished racism on the behalf of white supremacy, and let me be clear, by white supremacy, I'm not saying just people that are racialized or, created themselves, actually, racialized to be identified as white, but are a lot of our own people, a lot of our own indigenous Nicanlaca people are lending themselves for this agenda. We have a lot of traitors among our people. We have a lot of self-hating people that somehow convince themselves to defend and support this regime of white supremacy on hyper turbo blast. So let's understand something. When people right away the ignorance of white supremacy, and a lot of these people have very low IQs, but their rhetoric basically stems with, this is our country, you are illegal, you broke the law, yada yada. Now, they do not affiliate themselves, they do not identify themselves with the illegal occupation of this land. We as indigenous people, labeled, mislabeled under the colonial terms of Hispanic, Latino, raza, and mestizo, or if we identify with the colonial terms that were given to lands that were divided by European colonialism, and they broke off from the motherland, and all of a sudden they want us to identify with those countries like Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, whatever name they used to identify that newly independent land, country. We have to understand that that did not benefit us as a people. That benefited the criollo, and the majority of the cases, the criollo continuation of the occupation of our lands. Now, we are called illegal and undocumented, right? But these Europeans and all of these self-hating sellouts and traitors do not understand the process of history and colonization of our land. Those initial European invasions, whether they were the original that came out of the newly created Spain, whether it was Columbus, whether it was the various and numerous Plymouth Rock, and whatever trip they came on, whatever type of incident that happened in Europe that brought their asses here to our continent, not once did they try to, as a cultural, as a new arriving presence, as a new presence on our continent, not once did they try to abide by our laws, not once did they try to adapt and assimilate into Nicantlaca indigenous culture, language, not once. They came with the predisposed idea that whatever and whomever they've encountered were already inferior to them. So this creation of supremacy, this creation of entitlement, this creation of whiteness, this creation racialized identity became more sophisticated and more sophisticated as they kept stealing the innovations and creations in science from other peoples and kept refining their own tools of genocide. And so they first of all kill 95% of our population, and then they start creating little cities, little towns, naming shit, taking shit, using smallpox as biological warfare. And all of a sudden, right, when they become independent from their motherland, and I'm talking about what is called the United States, all of a sudden, this paper of known as the Constitution, which a lot of our scholars have argued that those ideas, a lot of them came from our own original concepts of law and collective thinking. So they create the legality that justified their genocidal presence on our lands. Again, completely overlooking our rules, our social rules, our laws, just because we didn't have the European version of legality, of written documents of rules. All of a sudden, they use that defined legality, right, to steal, to take, to extort, to completely illegally take over a landmass that belonged to millions and millions of people throughout the whole continent. And when I'm talking about this experience, I'm not just talking about the experience of our people here, so-called the United States, but in general, this was a practice done all over our continent, which is why we in the Mexica movement are always emphasizing that we should unite as indigenous people. Even though obviously we have our differences, we have our language differences, we have our identity defining depending on our different nations, our overall experience with this colonial presence, with this genocidal occupation of our continent has been very similar. And so the tactics that we can use to liberate ourselves, to decolonize ourselves from this genocidal presence can be very beneficent to all of us of indigenous descent. And so we have to really understand how they're playing this whole rhetoric of legality, of being documented, of undocumented. All of a sudden, this little newfound white European colonial nation now wants to use something that they invented over the genocide of 95% of our people, over the enslavement, the racial rape, the starvation, the massive killings of our people, the violence. All of a sudden, all of that is completely smashed and dismantled by this supposedly new rise of legality, right, of the U.S. Constitution. And while it is a valid document, obviously, that's what founded this colonial nation, this occupying force, we have to understand that that process of creating legality, creating a culture of forced legality, forced rules and laws, all of that came at the expense of over 100 million of our people killed. So we have the legality created by white supremacy in the form of a constitution that came after the complete, almost 99% of our destruction as a culture, as a people, as our language, as our theology. This complete worldview, this complete presence of who we were as a people was very much well destroyed in order for them to give way to this constitution, to this colonial country. And again, I'm using the U.S. as an example to show you what took place throughout all of our continent. This could very well be the story of Mexico. This could very well be the story of El Salvador. This could very well be the story of Nicaragua. The tactics were the same. The tactics were the same. It could have been in the English, done in the English language, or done in the Spanish language, or done in Portuguese. The fact is, we have a complete massive invasions of Europeans into our continent. And again, killing 95% of our population, enslaving those of us that survived, forbidding us to speak our languages, forbidding us to create, to continue viewing the world through the eyes of our ancestors and our traditional ways. All of a sudden, that becomes irrelevant to them and their concept of this theft of our land, of this forced legality. Let's zoom into 500 years later. Fast forward, right? Now we have this concept of legality, this concept of what is the rule and what is the law being used to oppress and negate our right as indigenous people to be on this continent. This land, this piece of the planet, which our ancestors inhabited for thousands and thousands of years, belongs to us indigenous people. We as a people have been systematically kept ignorant of this history. And even if people say, oh, well, in Mexico or Central America, we're not taught this history in Mexico and Central America, because the people that govern Mexico and Central America are the descendants of the initial invaders that fought for their independence of their motherland. We as indigenous people, mixed blood and full blood, were not part of that agenda. Yes, we were used for those wars and those civil wars to fight for their independence, but it was never meant to make us independent from them. So I want to put that out there because there's a lot of ignorance. A lot of white supremacists are very ignorant of this. We as a people are very ignorant of this. We accept the rhetoric. We accept their concepts of legality. We accept it because we do not understand where it comes from. We do not understand the sacrifice that they did. They committed human sacrifice. They sacrificed almost over 100 million of our people to create this country, these colonial countries on our continent. So when we talk about legality and we talk about illegal aliens and we talk about being documented and undocumented, let's keep in mind that Europeans, as a group of people that invaded us and these little different migrations, right, to our continent, never assimilated to us, never respected our rules, our laws, our traditional ways, never tried to assimilate, tried to learn our languages, tried to understand our culture. It's always been a very genocidal, a very violent encounter with Europeans. And so now they want to use this concept of legality to claim some type of moral ground and that they belong here. We have to wake up. We have to understand. We have to decolonize the way we understand our history, our identity. We have to decolonize the way we understand their presence on our continent, their history, and their identity. This is Citlalli from the Mexica movement. Remember that we are not illegal to this continent. Remember that we have been here for thousands and thousands of years. And please study the history. Please study the origins of these terms that they use to identify us with, like Hispanic, Latino, raza, mestizo. We in the Mexica movement have been trying to educate our people, are trying to educate the world that we are indigenous people. We are Nican Tlaca people. All of us on this continent have very, very similar experiences and encounters with these European invaders. Therefore, we must create a unity that respects, that values each and every one of our nations, but at the same time understands and sees that similarity against this actual colonial and genocidal presence. We in the Mexica movement, we offer the term Nicantlaca to unite all of us, which comes from the Nahuatl language, meaning we people here. A lot of our other groups of people also had other ways to call themselves. That is what we're offering as a starting point. We have to understand that this whole concept of legality, this whole concept of papers, no papers, there is a trail of that. And when you follow the dots and you connect the dots, you understand that this was at the expense of our people in the millions, the genocide of 95% of our population. Let's remember that next time they call us illegal. Let's remember that next time they call us undocumented. Let's remember that, and let's study who we are, study who they are. Thank you.